Hey friends, I'm so excited for another couch chat. I know that we've been talking about bigger things this season and everything from, what it's like navigating life post-divorce, finances, politics. I mean, we have really been diving in on the things that matter to us. And if you know anything about me, I'm all about making sure that we are grace-filled, that we are as balanced as we can be while maintaining our values and our ethics and morals. But I also want to make sure that you have every single thing you need to make the choice that makes sense for you, your family, and your neighbor. And what that means is I don't just lean on my own understanding. I also bring in my good friends who I think are experts in their respective space, but also are doing big things and have the receipts to show for it. And for that reason, I'm really excited because I am here today with my dear friend, Kitty. And if you don't know about Kitty Brundtner, you are about to be beyond floored. I don't bring people on if I don't think it's worth the time. And we're going to actually chat about something that's a pretty hot button issue. And I tell you, people get fired up about this, but by the end of this conversation, I think you're going to be like, I did not know that. That is such a reasonable way to look at this issue. And I'm not going to get all roped up in the internet back and forth. I'm going to make sure that I am empowered to think for myself and to do what I think makes the most sense because we're sensible folk. So Kitty Brundtner's here, and she is the founder and CEO of March 4th. And this is an incredible organization that is doing powerful things. And I'm going to have Kitty tell you a little bit more about that. Kitty, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. This is the best day. I'm so excited.
I'm so excited that you're here. People don't know. We have such, when we met, I was like, oh, she is my people's. Like,
Same.
Just the same energy, mostly because we are the people that see an issue, and it's not just like, oh, I saw the paper and picked it up. We're like, I saw the paper, I picked it up, I built a robot that now picks up paper, and I bought the restaurant and I revamped it, and then I also recycled said paper. Like, we are team the most. You are that person. You are team extra the most. You saw an issue and you fix an issue. So let's get right into that. What is March 4th? What's it about? What's the issue?
Yes. So March 4th is an organization that I founded accidentally.
Mm-hmm.
It is a nonpartisan organization, and the only goal.
What does nonpartisan mean? Just so people can understand that.
Nonpartisan means we are not aligned with either party. In fact, we're aligned with no party. It's regardless of the political parties, we are focused on the issue. And that issue is singular. And that is to reinstate the federal ban on assault weapons. And I have to use the word reinstate. And I didn't know this when I founded March 4th almost 2 years ago. America had an assault weapons ban for 10 years.
Wait. Okay. So first things first, because I do think that the word ban
totally
can feel so triggery, especially for anyone here. Because we run the gamut here, right? Like, I've got my old school Southern sisters, and I've got, my 2A right, I grew up in a hunting family, and I also have, people in my community that are like, listen, like, I have never touched a weapon. And, what are you talking about here? Like, so just help me understand, because I think the word ban can sound kind of crazy pants. Mm-hmm. And ban makes me think, just kind of speaking for everyone, you mean no guns in existence in America anywhere. And so tell me so that's not it.
Goodness, no. Okay. And I think that's the biggest the reason that we have found this niche is I think for so long, the conversation has been all the guns or no guns.
Mm-hmm. Which is that's people say gun control. It must mean that, or gun ban. It must mean that,
right.
So all guns, no guns.
Right. And there's just, you can't have that polarizing of a stance in America to get anything done, regardless of what it is.
I can't even have that stance in my house to figure out dinner.
Right.
Like pizza or salads.
Or even the type of pizza.
People will be like, starve.
Totally.
I choose option 3, not eating.
We cannot agree. So I think what's really interesting is to look at this as, yes, we had an assault weapons ban. What that meant was assault weapons, which are military grade weapons, mm-hmm. weapons that were designed to be used in war and kill the most amount of people in the shortest amount of time as effectively as possible. That's
so like the Arnold Schwarzenegger, like cool, fast, super fast shooting, those type of things. Like that's an assault weapon, not just like a hunting rifle.
No. I mean, it's an AR-15.
Sure.
It's an AK-47. These weapons were designed for one purpose. And from 1994 to 2004, With both Democrats and Republicans supporting the bill, it was signed into law. And we did not have civilian access to these weapons.
Wait, so I think this is actually really important to call out because most of us don't even know this. And I think we don't know this because, frankly, we benefited from it. And you know how you just didn't even realize it was a thing until it wasn't there. So I'm going to be really honest. I feel like, and I think a lot of, my friends on here will say the same thing, like things got really crazy recently with like school shootings, mass shootings, things like that. And when I say crazy, I do remember like Columbine growing up, right? Like I do remember that there were mass shooting events, but I feel like that the casualties are just so much worse. Like you used to hear about like, things would happen like in a mall and it'd be like 5 people or 10 people. And which look, every single life is relevant and matters. But I felt like it wasn't as big. But all of a sudden, you know how we think back to fonder times? Now I'm like, what do you mean at a concert 100 people are, dead and injured? What do you mean an entire school classroom? Mm-hmm. Now, is that because, or is there some correlation between the assault? Like walk me through if that's what we're seeing and feeling and why 94 to 2004 felt like golden era.
So what I always say is the only benefit of this law expiring is that we have the data to know that it worked. So we know, because data, that you were 70% less likely to die in a mass shooting when this law was in place. When the law expired in 2004, mass shootings began to skyrocket to the point where we are now, where we're breaking our own American records every year of most mass shootings in a year.
Wait, so you're saying it's getting worse every year? It's not that it's just a law. It's just every year it's getting worse.
Yeah, that hockey stick. Mm-hmm.
What?
And there's many, many reasons and a lot of different, there's a lot of complexities. But my whole goal, my career is in sales, and it's about translating things and making it easy to understand. Like I went to a Big Ten university. I am not an Ivy Leaguer. I am not a scholar or policy wonk. If I can understand this, anyone can. Mm-hmm. And so when we look at this, when I founded this organization, it was after several mass shootings had occurred, and the common denominator was that the shooter obtained the AR-15 legally. And
so this isn't even like, because I mean, I'm just going to say it transparently. Yeah. Every time that one of these shootings happens, it's always, well, they were mentally unwell. Mm-hmm. And, what we really need to do is have better screening, both for their mental wellness, in addition to for them to have access to weapons. Mm-hmm. But what you're telling me is that in these situations, the weapons were obtained legally, but it wouldn't have been legal in between 94 and 2004.
Correct. And what I'm saying is, look, gun violence is a rampant
It's a huge issue, just in general. We're not talking about solving every problem entirely, right?
And we can't.
Yeah.
But if you look at the deadliest mass shootings, the common denominator is the legally obtained assault weapon. And so our whole thing is, if we could mitigate that, shouldn't we?
We would cut down, I mean, just the numbers are the numbers. If we were to reinstate this, then my odds is 70%. Right away. Less likely to die in a mass shooting. Me, my child, my neighbor, my husband.
Yeah, based on the data of when it existed. I think when you look at the
But possibly even more now, because you said it's going up.
Precisely. When you look at the effectiveness of these weapons, and we have brought doctors and physicians to the Hill kind of to explain this from a data perspective. These weapons were designed to be as effective as possible. And what that means is they create, trigger warning, like cavities in the body, right? So we have doctors come to the Hill saying, hey, no matter how highly trained I am or where I've studied, I can't recreate an organ. And so while I can try to save a gunshot victim wound, right, where it's an inbound, in and out wound, like I can't recreate an organ in somebody's body. They will tell Congress, I cannot save a child who is hit by an AR-15 because the surface area, the way these bullets work, you cannot.
The hole's too big. It's blowing up the body.
Correct. So we don't have the tools to react to these weapons. So when they are used, and the reason they are the mass shooter's weapon of choice is because they're effective.
Because let's just be completely transparent. If you have a mental health issue, or you are a child, or you are young, you may not be a very good shooter. So let me pick something that I know will help me accomplish my goal without being very good at whatever the skill is.
Correct.
So also when you tell me this piece about kind of what doctors are saying about, because I thank God that I don't have intimate knowledge of this. And I pray that I go my whole life without ever knowing anything about how this goes. But I also know that if something isn't done, whether or not people agree with what we're having a conversation here, that it is just what it is, right? Like, so we pray that it's better. But what you're telling me about this sort of body damage piece is that right now, if there is a mass shooting and someone is using an assault weapon, it's basically like before, if it was just like a hunting rifle or a handgun, I could go in there and throw the equivalent of let's say a grape at people, and I could only throw 3 grapes. And so I would hit 3 people. But now in my odds of trying to hit someone with an assault rifle, it's like me throwing watermelons and having the ability to hit 50 people.
And having a conveyor belt of watermelons if you have a high capacity magazine, which basically allows you to reload and not have to reload basically. So I think it's easy to get technical with this topic, but at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is limit death.
We're not trying to fix guns. That's what you're saying.
No.
It's just, I just want less people to die if possible.
Correct. And what's really shocking to me is 2/3 of America, including half of Republicans, agree. So that we have the majority of America that supports the reinstatement of the assault weapon ban because it is logic. And when I started this, that was the biggest question that I had.
Yeah, take me back to that. When did you start this? Why did this happen 2 years ago? What light bulb made you feel like this is something worth your time?
So I always say when Sandy Hook happened, I was 25 and it was horrific. I think we all remember where we were that day. But as a naive and selfish 25-year-old, I just figured that the adults in the room would figure it out.
Oh, obviously.
By the time it impacted me.
Obviously.
And then that didn't happen. And so when the tragedy at Uvalde at Robb Elementary happened in May of 2022, I was completely wrecked because for the first time, I could picture this impacting my life in a very real way because I was sending my oldest child to kindergarten that fall. And I realized I was sending her to a mass shooting target in elementary school because I had to educate her in our country. And I remember my husband and I went overseas for a long planned trip the day after Uvalde happened. So it's all I could talk about. And we were fortunate enough to go to the French Open. And so it's this collection, melting pot of people from across the world. So it was the only thing I could talk about. And as you remember, it was all over the news. And so people knew, right? And these are parents from France, Germany, England, Spain, New Zealand, Australia. And it was as if they all got together before talking to me and created their talking points because their feedback was the exact same. They were like, I'm so sorry. We've seen how horrible. And this will never be our reality. We don't have access to guns, let alone assault weapons. So we just don't get what you guys are doing over there. And I think that planted a seed of, we know this is an American problem, but when you get outside your bubble and realize that
this is not the reality for others.
This isn't normal.
Yeah.
Right. And then about a month later, it was the 4th of July. And because of COVID, my kids had never been to a parade. And I have 3 young kids. At the time, they were 5 and twin 2-year-olds. And we went to our hometown parade. And the town over from us had another parade. Suddenly, we're getting calls that there's an active shooter at the parade the town over. And, at first you're like, no.
This is not even real.
Maybe a domestic something one-off.
For sure.
And then it was very quickly, very sobering where we had to shelter in place from a man at large with an AR-15 who had just wreaked havoc on this day that we're celebrating American independence, right? And I'm getting text messages from friends that had run for their lives, and one of them had shared a blanket with a now orphaned 2-year-old whose parents brought him to a parade and didn't come home, right? And it was the worst day. And I remember my 5-year-old being like in her red, white, and blue at home, why can't we go outside? And my husband and I are, in tears trying to figure out what's going on with the news in the other room. And in my head, I'm like, the reason you can't go outside on the 4th of July is because I'm raising you in America. That's why. And so for 24 hours, it was despair. And this is secondhand trauma, right? I wasn't there. And still, it was the worst 24 hours. And then I just got pissed and spicy. And if people know me, they know that doesn't take a lot for me to get opinionated about something. And I'm like, okay. So I start talking to the internet, as one does. And I'm like, why does someone need an AR-15? What am I missing? Is there something that like is requiring this to be a part of our lives? Because,
can I just like
please.
pause for a second and say I appreciate this energy of your first step was actually research. Like, why is this a thing? And I think that that's something a lot of us are missing because we're so caught up in our own values and experiences where we just say, well, I always grew up with guns. Well, I always, this is what it was. Like, I mean, I'm African, like hunting or, kind of being involved in your environment. Like, it's just not culturally, guns are not part of our culture in that way. But it's not unusual, to be able to interact in that way, So I think it's interesting to hear that your first response with your spicy, feisty nature, right, was, what am I missing?
Correct.
And so you went online to get information, much like some people are listening right now who are saying, look, like I didn't know this stuff, So what were you looking up?
I was trying to educate myself on like how the government works. Like if we wanted to do this, or why hasn't this been done? Or what am I?
Did you know about the ban already?
No, I didn't. What I like to say is like, I voted. That was I wasn't hiding under a rock. Yeah. But I stayed on the sidelines, and shame on me on a lot of issues. I
mean, if it's shame on you, then it's shame on all of us. Because I think a lot of us are we think that that's our civic duty, like we're content to live our lives, So I think we all feel that way.
Yeah, but I think like I sidelined myself because I'm like, well, I couldn't possibly, right?
Sure.
I don't know.
It's too big and I don't know what to do.
Totally.
But our government's actually designed for us to be able to participate.
Yes, which I didn't realize.
Yeah.
But I'm like, I would look at things and be like, well, I'm not smart enough for that. I don't understand that well.
Or
like
it's too big.
They've got it.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so as I started just being like, all right, I'm going to figure, like, I just want to understand, what am I missing? Because clearly there must be something.
Of course.
And I remember talking to friends that I had that worked on the Hill, and they're kind of like, well, here's the deal, this. I'm like, does Congress work? Well, my first question was, can the president create an executive order to ban assault weapons?
I don't know. Can he?
No, we are not.
Really?
We're not a dictatorship. It won't stand.
Okay, got it.
And I'm like, well, when you say it like that makes sense.
I love that you're like, what is the fastest way to get what I want?
Yes.
If I can just text this guy and be like, hey, can you just issue a thing and then we can be done? Because I have anxiety and I've got twins.
And that's
this
like,
is so mom.
Look, it's mom, but it's like privileged white woman. Like, okay, just like, let me know what I need to do.
Who do I need to call?
Right.
Find me a manager.
Right. I know it's a white man. Find me the white man.
Right now.
And so I started asking that, but the answer is no. Congress passes laws. I'm like, okay, good to know. I must have fallen asleep in that civics class or whatever.
Right.
And so as I started getting this information, I started getting even more like this echo chamber was louder and louder of people like, I know this is insane, etc. And so I asked the internet on July 5th, I think I want to go to DC and scream at the top of my lungs that I want a federal ban on assault weapons. Does anyone want to come? I understand it's going to be hard. I understand it's a long shot. I have to do something. I have to start somewhere.
I just need to put this somewhere right now.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I published my email address and I went to bed. And then I woke up to 300 emails.
Wow.
And like for the first time in 48 hours, I was crying tears of like hope.
Yes.
Instead of just complete despair and devastation. And it was people from across the country like, hey, I work on the Hill. I can help you. Oh, I work in PR. I can help you. Oh, I do event planning. I can help you. So this organization was founded 2 days after a massacre and on the backs of many, many other tragedies, right? This has been building. And I remember reaching out to a lot of other orgs that already existed like, hey.
So that's what I was going to ask you. So there are so many organizations that have some degree of task or goal related to, I'm just going to call it solving or addressing our issue around gun violence. Whether it is gun violence between gangs or gun violence in homes or gun usage. There's lots of, and this is me sort of holding your feet to the fire for anyone who's listening, why are you different?
Totally.
What is different about March 4th that like because I mean, I'm a big proponent of put your money where it's already working. Yeah. You're brand new. What is different about this that makes you think you're going to be more effective than the next person?
Totally. And like, why do we need another one? I get that a lot.
Like literally though, like what is, so you saw these people and this is great and you're feisty. What's different?
Yep. So number one, being nonpartisan is actually pretty uncommon in this space.
Tell me what makes you nonpartisan compared to everyone else, because people hear gun control, people hear ban. It doesn't feel nonpartisan. There are people right now who are saying, no, if you're trying to take away my right to have whatever gun I want, then That's not nonpartisan. That is liberal.
Fair.
Mm-hmm.
Now, perhaps that rhetoric, if all you're doing is listening to the media, then that's maybe what you think.
Mm-hmm.
The reason we're nonpartisan is because many of our supporters are from both parties, or they're like me, who's a political atheist, and I don't believe I have a home because
and your funding isn't from one or the other. Will you take everybody's money who's interested in this?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, good.
If it's green.
I just wanted to make sure, because there's nothing that screams nonpartisan that we take everybody's money.
Well, that was like a very big thing in the beginning is we made a very conscious effort to not fundraise on actblue.com, where a lot of our peer organizations fundraise, because I'm not here to get anyone elected. I'm not here to favor one party or the other. The fact of the matter is, we haven't reinstated this law in almost 30 years. And there's been power shifted on both sides,
That's right?
And so I think it's important I understand the partisan talking heads and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day.
You're here about the babies. That's what this sounds like.
Yeah.
It sounds like you're a mom who's here to make sure our babies are okay.
Yes. And going to logic, when this law was passed, we had Democrats and some Republicans, including the support of President Ronald Reagan, written in a letter that's published, you can find it, supporting this law. And so for it to be said now that this is partisan is just
isn't true. The data just doesn't support it.
It is incorrect.
Like you're actually, so you're not even talking about modifications to the original law. You're saying put this thing back in place that was written and supported by Reagan and also selected Democrats.
Right.
Okay, so it's basically like, hey, we all agree that murder is illegal. I'm pretty sure that's nonpartisan.
Right.
Okay, so this is like a similar concept.
So when I go into meetings on the Hill, and we mostly meet with Republicans because they are less likely to be out front on this issue because of the past 2 decades of this rhetoric. And where we start is, I think we can all agree that we don't want to see children being murdered in school, right? We may not agree on the solution to fix that, but let's start there.
That's right.
And that's where I'm going to my 15-year sales career of if I walked into my clients' or prospective customers' offices and was like, you're using this vendor? That's stupid. You're doing this wrong. They're not going to work with me.
Of course not. Of course not.
And so it's like, and I'm not meeting with them once. I've now met with over 400 offices and we meet with them multiple times. Like you build relationships with people, you bring them closer to the middle. I think a really interesting fact when you think about public policies that it follows public sentiment. It doesn't follow it as fast as we would like.
Sure.
But if you look at...
As long as we get there, lives will be saved.
Correct. And I do a lot of reading on, because all we have is history of like, how does change happen? Because to me, from a logic and data perspective, we agree on this. Majority of America agrees that we don't have tanks in our driveways and we don't need assault weapons in our homes. Couple quick things on that. This law will not take anyone's guns away. So this is by definition not a gun grab.
Got it.
Any legally owned assault weapon is grandfathered in. So it's like we're talking about the future sale and manufacture of assault weapons that we know to be the mass shooter's weapon of choice, and we'd like to mitigate that. So that's one piece. The other.
So let's not put new weapons into the hands of new babies who want to be new shooters.
Correct.
Makes sense to me.
Let's start somewhere that we can, agree on. The other thing you mentioned is the bill. There's now, for the first time in almost 30 years, there's 2 different pieces of legislation that could accomplish the same thing. Now, when you look at the government, which I've had to learn a lot about in the past 2 years, there's normally dozens, if not hundreds of different bills to accomplish one thing. And so for a long time, we've had one. Now, since November, we have a second bill that accomplishes the same thing. So that is progress.
Yes.
And I have to hold on to all of these little pieces of progress.
Oh,
right?
yeah. I mean, but they're all required. I mean, these are the steps that were taken for it to come into place the first time.
Right.
So, I mean, we're headed in the right direction. And what else makes March 4th different? Because I know that when I think of other organizations, what I always hear is they want a ban, and they also want training, and they also want so what are all the things that March 4th also wants?
Nothing. We want to reinstate the assault weapons ban, and then we're going to stop doing this.
So you want to get out of business?
I would love.
You want to go home?
Put me out of business. And by out of business, I mean we're a nonprofit and I'm a volunteer. So
that's
give me back my time with my kids.
You're like, I'm trying to not go to the Hill anymore.
Right.
I don't want to talk to these people anymore.
But I think what's important to know when you think about what's different is that gun violence, to your point, has so many pieces to this puzzle to solve. We've got red flag laws, we've got safe storage, we've got waiting periods, we've got we have so many things to focus on.
Sure.
And if everything is important, then nothing is. And I learned that in business, and it's very true in advocacy. And so our goal is to take the low-hanging fruit of gun legislation, which is a law that already existed and worked, and bring it back. And if we can help propel the movement that way, then wonderful. We're not here to tackle all the things, and that may be a negative in some people's eyes, and it may be a positive. It is what it is. I think we're playing our piece of the puzzle in a nonpartisan way, singularly focused, and we work with a lot of these organizations behind the scenes, and I've gotten to know a lot of these leaders, and they're doing wonderful work and at a bunch of different levels, right?
Sure.
There's a lot of local and state level laws that people are focused on. We are federal. It has to, guns don't respect state lines. It's got to be federal.
True. That's true.
And so being singularly focused also helps because I have ADHD and I'm like, just tell me one thing.
Just
I can
one
drive
thing.
one
Let
thing.
me just drill down on that detail and get it done. So, what's interesting is learning more about the organization and meeting you and sort of seeing my own like fiery soul sister and get it doneness, it also can be overwhelming when we, as regular folk, are like, okay, so I'm all in, because I know that's what people hearing right now are like, oh, you're preaching to the choir, sister. Like these are already things that I was thinking all this time. Yeah. I know already, y'all, that you are having these conversations in your home and you're already saying to yourself, I feel the same way. I just didn't realize that there was a place that wasn't trying to do all the things, and I'm letting you know there's a place for this, but we ain't like you, okay? We're not like, I'm running up to hill and taking care of twins, and I don't know if we can do it. I don't know if we could do it, Katie. So
we can do it.
What does it look like to help or to do something to kind of head us in this direction, even if we can't, because sometimes we get overwhelmed.
Yeah,
like I mean, you saw this. You flew to Europe. You held your own like fake me out UN at a tennis tourney, and then came back and founded a company. Okay, Katie, you're different. Okay, for the rest of us, what do we do from our kitchens to help you?
So our whole like slogan, I guess you could say, is participation is required. And what's nice is like participation is whatever it looks like for you. So you know that saying, the best kind of sunscreen is the kind you'll wear. The best kind of participation is the kind you'll do. So that could be following us on Instagram and just getting a little peek into like what we're doing and what the updates are and what your little task of the day can be.
Can we also tell the truth about that, y'all, from a business standpoint? The more followers they have, the more visibility they're going to have on the Hill, because you better believe that if there's anything that politicians pay attention to, it's how many people can you reach the ear of.
It's so weird.
It's so weird, but they may not understand what the internet is, right? But they definitely understand if you're saying I can send one tweet and reach 1 million people.
I'll say, oh God, I wish it was 1 million. We're working on it. But you know what?
Get there. Yeah.
It's such a true thing. I remember being on the Hill and this is how we communicate. It's like, so what would you like us to tell our 60,000 followers? And they're like, oh, okay. Well, now that we're talking, it puts a little bit more pressure on. So yeah, participation could be following us.
Yes.
It will give you access to like we try to just break it down. We're not going to, put the bill in front of you. Yes. Again, the barometer is me. So like we are University of Iowa grad, go Hawkeyes, but like we're not known for our intelligence necessarily. I can talk to people, but that's about it.
Right.
And then the other thing, I think there's different steps. You could call your legislators and we can tell you, who are those people? Because that's things that maybe people don't know. And we have a link in our bio that'll show you who are your senators and your representative, a literal link that will click and start dialing those numbers. You don't even have to write down a phone number. Let's make it easy. What to say in that 30-second call with a 22-year-old intern. It's not scary, I promise. Or even coming to the Hill with us and lobbying with us. And we just try to make this advocacy journey accessible. But I think the ultimate goal is participation. When you think about the gun violence epidemic in America, it's easy to say, well, I don't get involved in guns. I don't get involved in politics. But here's the problem with that statement. Guns are the #1 killer of kids in America, and they have been for 2 years. And
only for 2 years. What was it prior to that?
Car crashes.
Wow.
And more than cancer, more than cars, like the problem with saying you don't get involved is if it were any other product that killed kids at this rate, we'd pull it from the shelves. We'd have it banned.
Baby formula. I mean, we have
swings?
recalls just in case.
Yeah.
We're like, hey, we found out that we had 2 cans of something that did something weird. And so we pulled every item from the shelf.
Correct.
You cannot have it anymore.
But the same weapon is used, being purchased legally in all of these mass shootings. And we're like, well, it's not the time to talk about it. It is. It's a product.
It is.
The Second Amendment is sound, but it is not unlimited.
That's good.
And that's the whole point here, is we believe in the right to bear arms.
You're basically talking about moderation, which is it's really interesting because, I mean, the more that I have been involved in this conversation, it just is, y'all, it's in such keeping with everything we talk about grace, about recognize that we're imperfect, about doing our best with what we've got. This is not about showing up and being superheroes. This is not about perfect solutions. This is literally saying, look, I am not going to instantly become a gluten-free, vegan, wheatgrass shot drinking, 2-a-day workout person if I'm eating donuts every day. Right. But your girl can eat a salad.
Yeah.
Because it is one step in one direction. And I really appreciate that. And you guys know I'm always trying to elevate voices and find people that allow us to create change with grace. And that really sounds like what you're trying to do here is just a graceful solution that can make a difference.
Yeah. And it's, again, it's a low-hanging fruit. Like, we already had it. This isn't new. And I think that's the best thing. Is
and actually what's interesting is we already had it. And anyone listening right now, unless you are, 12, like you pretty much grew up and benefited from a time where this existed. That is real.
That's the thing. I think about my high school career, and I never did a lockdown drill. We did tornado drills. I never did a lockdown drill.
I didn't even know what a lockdown drill was.
Right.
Yeah.
You can't prevent tornadoes, so we did tornado drills. But now we've got this generation that is coined Generation Lockdown, and what they know to be normal is drills to hide because we have easy access to weapons. That's just why. Yes, we have mental health issues. So does the rest of the country, or the world. The rest of the world hasn't cured mental illness. So there's something, right? Again, this is logic.
And we're all humans.
The product is the problem. It's not all guns. I understand. But can we limit the access to the ones that create the most damage that you actually cannot use in hunting, because you cannot eat the animal that you shoot with an AR-15 if it explodes?
That makes so much. I mean, honestly, it's like, man, we wish they didn't even exist at all, so that we wouldn't even have this conversation, because you can still have a whole war and not have, assault weapons. But
seriously,
all the things.
Yeah, I think when you think about like the benefits and stuff, I think that's another really interesting point real quick is when we go to the Hill and we meet with these offices, oftentimes you're meeting with their staffers that manage these topics. Sure. And what we've noticed is we're meeting with a lot of these graduates of the Generation Lockdown. And so even in Republican offices, right, these are people saying, well, yeah, this makes sense, because you don't have to explain it as a theoretical. Like they've lived it. They've sent, I hate to say it, but
y'all, Gen Z has babies now. I remember for me as a millennial, I was like, oh, Gen Z is the young ones. No. Gen Alpha's driving. Right. Gen Z has babies. We are the olds. Okay. Yeah. So now that we are officially the olds, we've got this Gen Z generation that literally does not, they were born in 2002. So they weren't in school when this ban was in effect. So they only know drills. They only know school shootings. And what's amazing is we can create a world, and this is what you're building, and I applaud you for every single day, Kitty, a world where our grandchildren are able to go to school and not have lockdown drills.
Totally. And the thing is, like, I wish it was just schools,
or anywhere. Yeah,
but totally. It's just when you look at this, concerts. I haven't been to a movie
at the movie theater. Things like that.
Now,
and I mean,
a bowling alley.
Oh, bowling alley. I mean, and I posted recently on a trip that whenever I go and stay in my hotel room, I bring like some sort of extra secure lock for my door. It's just something I do. I travel a lot, and it's just being mindful. Even if, because I mean, heck, I've had people come in to the wrong room, or housekeeping coming in early. So I was showing kind of how I jury rig a hanger in order to kind of double lock my doors. And what was interesting, and I will never forget this, and I wanted to tell you and all of you that are listening, I had a teacher comment. And a teacher said, hey, I just want you to know that we had someone come in who taught us that if you have one of those doors that has the sort of bendy hinge at the top, you can actually just use like a tie or a belt and just tie it around that. And that'll actually keep the door jammed a lot better than a hanger. And, I'm a teacher and they taught us that for our classroom. And here I was, because I don't have lockdown drills, having what was quote unquote a normal interactive conversation where she was offering an enhancement on how to barricade a door. And this is a teacher who teaches kindergarten. And she learned this about her classroom. And my response to that, there are lots of, people who respond to the comment. They're like, oh, thank you, or that's good, or that's interesting. And my response to that, and where I want to leave all of us here today, was I'm really sorry that you know that information. And I'm grateful that you shared it with me today. But I really hope that there's a world where you will never need that and you will never have to reteach that, because that is not what our teachers should be teaching.
No, they didn't sign up for this.
And Kitty, I'm so grateful and thankful to you for being here today, teaching us and getting to Capitol Hill and teaching them. And I cannot wait until you are so entirely unemployed from this profession and staying home every single day. And I just want to say thanks for my grandchildren in advance, because they're going to be safe and they're going to grow and they're going to thrive. So I appreciate and I see you in all you do. And I'm here to support you in any way possible. And I know everyone here is going to follow and do all the things.
Thank you. You're the best.
You're the best. And y'all, you can definitely follow, you can donate, because, time, treasure, all matters. But all the details will be below in the show notes, because participation is required.